All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Senior Council meeting for April of 2022. My name is Luke. I am your WebEx host today, handling technical things. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. The chat box is down at the bottom right corner of your screen, and I can direct questions to the presenter, or you can also raise your hand, and I will be able to call on you and unmute you. Without any more boring technical stuff, I will hand this over to Gretchen Lopez.
Thanks, Luke. Well, hello, everyone. You may have met me before. My name is Gretchen Lopez, and I'm the current chair of the Seniors Council of Douglas County. And we're so glad you could join us this morning for our meeting. We have an exciting program for you today. And before our presentation begins, we do have a few announcements. I'd like to start by thanking the county and the county commissioners for their ongoing support to bring our virtual meetings to you via WebEx and providing Luke as our technical expert. We certainly couldn't do this without their help. There will be lots of great information today, and okay, Luke, we are not ready for that slide yet. Thank you. We have lots of great information today, and you may want to take photos of particular slides instead of frantically writing your notes. Remember, we kind of talked about that before. If you get out your iPhone, put it on the camera function, if there are some slides that are important to you and you would like to take a photo of them, that's an easy thing to do. Also, our speaker's PowerPoint presentation will be available to you at a later date, so you can save yourself the task of trying to capture all that great information too. However, it might be a good idea to keep a pen and paper handy to jot down some questions you have during the presentation, and then, as Luke mentioned, ask them either via the chat feature or raise your hand and Luke can call on you. Okay, so let's get going. Here are some announcements. We're reaching out to our local older adult congregate living facilities to introduce ourselves to those residents. We visited Oakwood 2 apartments last week here in Castle Rock, and we'll be working with the Audrey apartments in Highlands Ranch later this month. Our goal is to engage more of our older adults with the council and grow our membership. And you can help us do that by inviting friends to our meetings and telling them all about us. So now we're ready for the Vintage and Vibrant slide. You may know, in addition to our monthly meetings, we sometimes sponsor community events. And our executive committee has already started planning our signature educational event, Vintage and Vibrant, for September 2023. I know, a long way off, but it takes a lot of planning. This slide, you see, lists the various committees that will be collaborating on this project, and we need your help. If you'd like to offer your energy, your ideas, and suggestions by joining one of these committees, we welcome your participation. So let me go down the slide just quickly here. We have the Venue Location Committee, which will be researching possible event sites in Douglas County. You may remember our original Vintage and Vibrant was here in Castle Rock at the Event Center, and then the one we had after that was in the Pace Center in Parker. So we're really looking towards either Highlands Ranch, Lone Tree, some other location here in the county. And if you were on this committee, you would help us do that. Program development, of course, as it sounds, would be helping us figure out who would speak and on what topics we would have that day. You know that we have 3 simultaneous sessions 3 times during the day. So that's 9 topics and 9 speakers. They would also help with the designing the program booklet for the event. The Partnerships Committee would be helping us to reach out to specific organizations and companies as event partners. And those partners would offer some financial support and have a table at our event. So we would learn about them. Event promotion would be assisting us with the community awareness of the event and in trying to get as many people as possible to attend. Volunteer recruitment, we need plenty of volunteers for that particular day. That commitment would involve a 2-hour orientation before the event and then the day of the event. So if you would like to volunteer, and also volunteer for that particular committee to find more volunteers. We would really appreciate that. And then, of course, we have our registration and hospitality committee. Those folks would be greeting and directing both the attendees and the partners to various places within the event site. So if you have any questions or you want to express your interest, just contact me at my email that you see at the bottom of the slide, gkl4829@aol.com. I'll get back to you and we'll have a little chat. There's no obligation. If you just want to call and ask questions and find out a little bit more, that's fine. There's no obligation involved at that point. All right, so we're ready for our next slide, and that's all about a shred-a-thon, which is a fundraiser for the Parker Senior Center. So if you have some important documents that need to be shredded, here's an opportunity for you. The Senior Center in Parker is partnering with the Parker Police Department and Core Electric Cooperative to host this shred-a-thon on Saturday, April 23rd in the morning from 9 to 11:30 at Salisbury Park. Your confidential information will be shredded by DocuVault, who will ensure your documents are securely destroyed, so you can be confident in that. So when you arrive, you'll stay in your car and be directed through a path through the event. And whatever documents you'd like to have shredded, please place them in the trunk of your car or the truck bed of your vehicle. You won't be getting out. Nobody will be getting into your car. And please limit yourself to 3 copy paper boxes, you know, that where the copy paper comes in, or 3 kitchen garbage bags per vehicle so that they can handle everybody's information. And there is a $10 suggested donation per car, and all those proceeds will be benefiting the Parker Senior Center. This is a great start, first of all, in your spring cleaning. I know I've got a few things I've got to get rid of. And you'll be helping the Parker Senior Center also in serving our local seniors. Okay, we're ready for the next one, Luke. Finally, a great event to consider attending is the 18th Judicial District's Senior Law and Safety Summit. You may have attended this event in the past. It's a fabulous event. It's going to be occurring on Saturday, May 21st from 8:30 to 2 p.m. at the Charles Schwab Conference Center in Lone Tree, you know, right off of Lincoln Avenue. So there will be 12 informative workshops focusing on 3 topic areas. An opportunity to register for a private, free Ask a Lawyer session, and some resource information on numerous organizations in the area. Now, there is a $10 fee, but that covers a morning snack, a box lunch, and your personal copy of the Senior Law Handbook, which is very, very handy. We highly recommend attending this event, and we invite you to drop by our table and say hello. Okay, next up is our education chair, Tiffany Curtin, and she's going to tell us about an important survey that the libraries are conducting, as well as giving us an update on the presentations we're planning for the next several months, and then, of course, introducing today's speaker. Tiffany, what do you have to share?
And one of the things that we are really asking for your input, meaning the input of older adults in our community, is for you to complete a brief survey about library services. We want to make sure that we are giving you the best service possible, meeting your needs, and to know, you know, what we are already doing well, so that we make sure that we are maintaining that and continuing to improve. In the newsletter, the First Friday newsletter, if you're receiving that, you should have seen a handout that included a QR code. QR codes, you may have seen them in the last couple of years at restaurants who are using those and encouraging people to take a picture of the little square to get to a website, to get to menus. So it's the same idea if you've been using those QR codes at restaurants lately. Or I've also included the SurveyMonkey link here, and I will post that in the chat box as well if you just want to click on that as we conclude our meeting today. So we really do appreciate your input and hope to really make sure that we're serving you the best we can. I also want to announce we are very excited that we have a date for the groundbreaking for the new Castle Rock Library. So the new Castle Rock Library will still be at 100 South Wilcox Street, and we would like to invite you on May 2nd to join us at 10 a.m. We are asking that people register only so that we make sure we have enough delicious breakfast items to serve everybody who comes to celebrate with us during that hour. And on this picture, I've included a rendering of what the new library will look like. As you can see, there are a ton of windows. So it'll be a very bright and lively new location. If you go to that dcl.org/build/, you will also find where you can register, and you will see you'll be able to see a video of what to expect of a video tour of what this new library will look like. So we are very excited that this is happening for our community, and we have a completion ETA for the new library of fall of 2023. We will maintain services during this time, during the build, and lots of information if you go to that link. And I will also post that in the chat box. So back to the Senior Council news. Our next few upcoming meetings, I want to give you a little bit of a taste of what to expect. On May 5th, we will be having another virtual meeting, and the topic will be practical wisdom from an end-of-life doula. And Cindy Kaufman will be our presenter for that. On June 2nd, we will have our first in-person meeting in over 2 years at the Philip S. Miller Library in Castle Rock. And there we will be meeting the Douglas County Archives and Local History team and some of the new things that are going on, maybe some ways that you can get involved if you're looking for great, interesting volunteer opportunities. And then on July 7th, we'll have another in-person meeting at the Oakwood Senior Living, the new ones, and that is also in Castle Rock. And at that meeting, we will be hearing from representatives from the Colorado Talking Book Library and the Audio Information Network. And our speakers there will be Lori Sporing and Penn Street. And finally, very excited to introduce to you our presenter today, Dr. Linda Van Meter. And she is going to be sharing some wisdom and guidance for you to be a great co-pilot for the younger generations that are going through a lot of different events today that may be different than what you experienced, but you can still be a great co-pilot and help guide them through and these difficult times that they're living in. And now I'm turning this over to you, Dr. Van Meter.
Okay, let me just get in here. Okay. Well, first of all, good morning, everyone, and I'm glad that you were able to join this presentation. I would like to thank Gretchen Lopez for inviting me to speak, and Tiffany's help and Luke's help with the technology. So I do appreciate that. So my thanks and gratitude to you all. I'd like to give you a little bit of my background, because I know when I do presentations or when I go to presentations, I like to know a little bit about the background to see if the person really understands kind of where I'm coming from. I do have grandchildren. The youngest is 4 years old, although, you know, another one is expected on September 8th. And the oldest is 19. And let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 7. So they're boys and girls. And also, I was recently retired from East Stroudsburg University, where I was a director of counseling and psychological services and disability services when I retired. I was there for 30 years, so I really have seen changes in college students developmentally and about resiliency. And I talk about that because part of this presentation is going to be setting the stage for these difficult conversations. I'll have an example, a sample conversation, so you will know exactly the kinds of things to say, because I think that's also important. So I do have the presentation in three different parts, and each part, there's an overview for each part, and it'll tell you what is covered in each of those parts. So without further ado, let's start. I thought this slide was very funny. I like that these kids, and we like to see our grandchildren smiling all the time, although that doesn't happen all the time. And grandkids welcome anytime, parents by appointment only. And I think that's funny because sometimes we just don't want the grandchildren without the parents there. So I just wanted to highlight that. Okay, navigating difficult conversations with grandchildren, grandparents as co-pilots. I wanted to use the concept of co-pilots because we can be mentors or sages for our children, or we're guides to them. And I think that's very important. Our presence is more important than ever. And I will enumerate several reasons why. So in the overview, the first part, we're going to look at the goals and objectives of this presentation and key concepts that we're going to cover. Grandparents as co-pilots, what does that mean? We're going to take a look at the world then, when we were their age, and now. It's important to know what the experience is now. The role of stress as a protective mechanism, although maybe you don't think it is, but I think you will after this slide, and protective factors contributing to resilience. So, goals and objectives. 1, to understand how our children view their world is not how we experience our world. That is very important in 2 respects. 1, in that in today, the way with everything that's going on, they'll see it from a different level than we see it. And it's important that we don't catastrophize. It's important that we aren't sorrowful, that our children aren't experiencing the war like we did. I'm going to talk about how you can utilize the issues that we deal with today in a very proactive manner to help build resilience and adaptability in our children, okay? And the other way that we can view it differently, it's that it's not the world that we grew up in and the world that they're in are 2 different things. And we need to understand that perspective so we can come alongside them and talk about things that are relevant to them. 2, learn strategies on how to set the stage and approach conversations with grandchildren about difficult subjects. And I'm so glad I was asked to present on this because although many of us, when our children or grandchildren may be talking about difficult subjects, it's an opportunity to open a dialogue about it. Because if children or grandchildren don't come to you with these issues, that's a missed opportunity. And it also can be a way for you to help them once again become resilient and adaptable, that you're open and ready to talk about these things. Do not put pressure on yourself to know all the answers because you won't. Okay? But you can lead with reassurance and love. Help our grandchildren become more resilient and adapt to their changing environment with a positive mindset. Things change all the time. I have seen hundreds and hundreds of people in my career as a psychologist at the university in private practice. I didn't have people tell me they liked change. There was one person out of hundreds and hundreds of people that said they liked change. Well, whether we like it or not, change does happen. And after all, if things are always the same, I think that would be boring. Also, probably the most important part and the 3rd section of this presentation is to apply the information that we use. Sometimes we go to conferences and we get all this information, but then we don't know what to do with it. I will have actual guidelines and a sample conversation, how to have a difficult conversation. I think that's so important. Now, key concepts involved with this are the importance of perspective and point of view. See how your grandchildren are experiencing what's going on in today's world, and not just make assumptions about that. And I will have another slide that addresses that more specifically. Also, establishing the groundwork for communication pathways. I think what's important here is to know you're going to build a relationship. You build relationships with people and with your grandchildren, and having communications about difficult subjects. Understanding the importance of stress. Without stress, we wouldn't have progress. We wouldn't know that we have to change things. Stress can be a very good thing and a protective factor. I am going to talk about children and mental health. I am a psychologist. I feel I have to talk about that. And, kind of what to look for, not to pathologize things and not to overreact, but just to give you some information. And also the value of coping mechanisms. And I'll have some apps that you can visit to start maybe developing some coping mechanism for yourself and also for your grandchildren. So grandparents as co-pilots. I thought that these pictures were apropos, and when I thought to myself, well, taking it a step further, when you look at the dashboard of the plane, you're thinking, oh my gosh, right? There's a lot going on. Well, that's like a metaphor for life. There's a lot going on now in our life. So I thought that was interesting. But, having a co-pilot, someone to say, hey, you know what? You think this way, or I'm going to do that. What do you feel about it? Very important. Communication. Now, grandparents as co-pilots. I want to, sometimes what I will do is just speak briefly about a particular case to give an example of things. Of course, you would never know who these people are. I don't use their full names, but number one, grandparents as co-pilots, we're in a unique position really to be able to open conversations with our grandchildren, because grandchildren may be hesitant to talk about problems with their parents because they feel they may be judgmental or may not take them seriously. An example, I have a 15-year-old young lady who I just picked up as a client. I saw for the third time. And then when the mother called up, she said, listen, my daughter is having problems. I just read her journal and I'm very worried about her, but she really doesn't talk much. I said, okay, well, let me tell you. This young lady came in, she brought her journal in, she talked nonstop. Why? A couple of reasons. Her mother now was taking her seriously. The young lady also knew that if she talked to me, she didn't have to worry about taking care of my feelings. I think people are worried sometimes to talk about heavy subjects with their loved ones because then their loved ones are upset. And then the focus is on the loved one being upset. And then that just complicates issues, okay? Another young lady who's 19, who also doesn't talk to her parents about feelings because they really don't seem to ask her. They just say, well, she's a teenager, she stays in her room a lot. And they don't really ask her how she's doing. And they have taught her that they're really not there or receptive to her. Now, I just want you to understand, these are people who are educated, teachers, nurses, and it's not just, it's people are uncomfortable talking about these things because they don't know what to do with them. But once again, if your grandchild is coming to you with a subject that's a little difficult to talk about, that means they're trusting you. They're trusting you to help them with that. And that is wonderful. That's a wonderful thing. So, third thing is, let's move this away. Grandchildren may worry that you will not keep their conversations confidential. Let them know that you will do your best to honor their request, but there are times when it's important to let parents know. That is correct. I think that for when they say, well, will you not tell my parents about this? Okay, what do you say? You say, well, I will keep your confidence as long as I feel that that's going to be safe for you, but you can trust me that I will make the right decision to be helpful to you, and I will support you no matter what. Now, I know in Pennsylvania, and I don't think it's just Pennsylvania, there are mandated reporters, teachers and pastors, ministers. And mandated reporting is if a child will say that they have suicidal thoughts, they do have to report that. And I know as a psychologist, I have to do that as well. And on my first session with anyone, I review what's confidential and by law, what isn't. And by law, if a person says they're suicidal and they have intent, then I have to report that. But for you to be upfront about that with your child, I think that your grandchild is very important, but not, don't get yourself backed into a corner that you say, listen, you can tell me anything and I won't tell anybody, because then you're backing yourself into a corner. Oops. Uh-oh. What did I do here, Luke?
Click on the
Resume
slideshow.
slides. Oh, okay.
Yep.
Sorry about that. My glasses down. Okay, so the grandparents' role. First of all, and you all know this probably from experience, you need to respect the parenting style of the parents and their perspective. You may not agree with it, and they would be the first to tell you, well, you raised us in a certain way. These are our children, and this is the way we're doing it. If they're more permissive, if they're more rigid, I think you need to respect that and work with them. Your role as a grandparent to give unconditional love and reassurance. You already know a lot of these things, but provide wisdom through life experience. And also as a historical reference for the family and traditions. What kid doesn't love to hear stories about their parents? Okay. And I think that's important because to show that over the years, there's been stability in life and a relationship, and to act as a model for that. And traditions, kids like traditions. That's very important. Now, what's very important too, when we talk about perspective, is the world then and now. Now, I remember when I was growing up as a kid, and probably you were too, that we did have fire drills. I don't think as a kid I worried about the school catching on fire, but we had fire drills. We had the duck and cover drills where you had to go, under your desk. We were concerned about, nuclear war. The Vietnam War was going on, Cuban Missile Crisis. We had one house in the neighborhood that had a bomb shelter. I often wondered about how that would work out for the community. There was the assassination of JFK. We had polio and TB vaccination. So we had similar things then as now. But what was different is we are now inundated with social media. And we are also seeing that things are very much more prevalent. Now, our kids, they not only have fire drills, but they have drills if there's school violence or a school shooting, what to do. And there's social media and cyberbullying, which is very damaging to our children. I think that a 10-year-old girl in Aurora took her own life because of bullying on social media. And we need to be very aware of that. I'm going to talk about that later. The media coverage of events, I think that it's just, I'm sure that many of you had to realize that you just had to stop watching the media about COVID and the war because it's just too overwhelming. And it is, because we feel powerless. They experienced a pandemic in real time, and what they were supposed to do, wear masks, don't wear masks, and people dying. They're living through this. Virtual learning. In my practice, I see nurses from 3 different hospitals. I see principals, I see teachers, I see students. So I have a fair representation of how virtual learning has affected our students. And I think that every student I've had, and teachers too, say they didn't feel that their students learned anything. Then one girl said, no, I did learn one thing. I have to keep my computer, I have to make sure that my battery is fully charged. And they have social unrest and discrimination. We have now war in the Ukraine. We have discrimination, and our children are living this. So it's a bit different now than when we experience these things. For the world we live in today, there's school violence. You see these children here. There's a vigil for students who were killed in a school shooting. The COVID pandemic, with things changing from week to week. Wear a mask, social distancing. We have to be in school virtually, which was not very good developmentally for children particularly my teachers have told me for the younger set, because the younger kids, 4, 5, and 6, were not able to really work through some of the developmental hurdles and challenges. And now that they're back in school, they're acting much younger. There are also educational gaps. And when children were online virtually, it's very interesting because, it's very disconnected when they really need to connect. And as far as touching, who doesn't love a good hug? There was no touching, and it was very difficult. Cyberbullying and bullying is also something in the world today that we didn't, we might have had bullying, but not cyberbullying. The war in Ukraine, social unrest, that's our world today. Now, I mentioned stress as a protective mechanism. Now, stress is a constant in our life. We always have stress. Eustress is a positive stress versus distress, which is a negative stress, but we experience it physiologically in the same way. How is that? I'll give you an example. Buying a house. Oh, it's wonderful. We're going to buy a house. But you know what happens. And particularly today, can you afford the house? Is it going to pass inspection? How long are you going to be outbid? All those types of things. All right. Traveling. Traveling, people like to travel. Even before COVID, there is a stress of that we have our passport, what we're going to wear, what's the weather like, et cetera, et cetera. And nowadays, even more so. Having a baby. My daughter's pregnant and, she is, I don't know what to pick out, Mom. There's so many things. If you've ever gone to Buy Buy Baby to pick out a stroller, there must be like 20 strollers there. What do you pick? But it's a good thing, but it's stressful. Now, stress is a catalyst for change. If we don't have a stress or a difficulty, we're not going to change. Often we don't change. It's a warning signal to our mind and body that we need to do something different. When people come into therapy to me, I said, listen, you're here to change. Not because I'm telling you have to change. You're telling me you have to change because what you're doing isn't working for you. It's also a crisis or an opportunity. You can just think, oh my gosh, it's a crisis. Everything, everything that's going in the world now is falling apart. It's unstable. Or you can see it's an opportunity, and particularly with our children, an opportunity to develop competency, adaptability, and self-reliance. And I have another slide that's going to speak to that issue, because I told you that I've dealt with college students over 30 years, and I've seen the change in them. I think they're not as self-reliant. I think they become very dependent. They can be very unmotivated and psychologically and emotionally not as sophisticated as when we were in school. We had to rely upon ourselves much more. We had a different work ethic, and they're different. And coping in stress. Review, I hyphenate this because it's not review to just look at again. It's to review and view a situation from a different perspective. And I have a slide that speaks very specifically to that. Coping with stress is also reacting versus responding. Reacting is our first emotional way we see something. And responding is when you not only have that emotional part of you, but when kind of the dust settles and you think about things. Hans Selye was a doctor many years ago who worked in an emergency room, and he coined the term general adaptation syndrome, that he saw people, when you're in an emergency room, you get, you're told, oh, you have to have gallbladder surgery. Oh my God, I didn't know I had to have surgery. Oh, what am I doing? Well, or you say, well, you know what? People have gallbladder surgery, they survive, I'm going to be fine. Once you start thinking, so instead of just reacting to our environment, we need to think. And that's where we help our children and grandchildren and ourselves by saying, okay, let's problem solve. Let's be solution focused. That's very important. Protective factors, I wanted to put check boxes on this particular slide because I want you to think in your head, how many of these boxes can you check off that you do? Protective factors contributing to resilience. That you're going to have resilience is the ability to bounce back. Well, if you spend quality time with your grandchildren, you play games, you take walks, right? And sometimes when you do these things, they'll start talking to you about some of the, kind of what's going on in their life. Sometimes they'll talk about their parents. And so spending quality time together. Consistent family routines, very important. And I understand that's so challenging in life today, but having But as grandparents, even though they may not, the routines may be more interrupted in their own home because of practices after school, because of, meetings they have to go to, you can have certain things in your home that the kids can always rely upon. All of my grandchildren from 4 to 19, they love to come to our house because we have certain things. Grandma and grandpa always have some special thing for them. We do this, we do that. And it's interesting because my son, leading into the next one, limit news, TV, and social media. My son has said, Grandma doesn't want any iPads in the house, so we're not doing that. I thought that was pretty interesting. Probably a carryover from when my kids were kids that, TV was limited. They had reading time they had to do. And I think it's very important to give down times. There's times to do it, but times not to, so you can participate in family activities together and have fun. Parental and familial support helps a child to develop self-esteem and problem-solving skills. If we solve all the problems of our kids, it's a missed opportunity then for them to problem solve. And I think that's what's happened with kind of the generation of kids, the college students we have today. We solved all their problems for them, and they don't know how to solve their own problems. So developing a problem-solving skill to figure out, and this is where you can capitalize on things, to think strategically. If your kids are in sports, because I know that when I deal with anyone, I try to talk about problem solving in a manner they get. Like, when I had student athletes that I would see, I'd say, well, you think on your feet all the time. You're problem solving all the time. Things are changing all the time. So you can already do this. So applying that to the problem we have now, let's think about that. So you can always be supportive and tell your grandchildren, you know what, you already know how to do this. You do this already. Let's figure this out together. Participation in constructive recreation, whether it's organized sports, clubs, volunteer, giving the child an opportunity, but also an expectation. We want to be part of a larger community. I think that's also critical. Okay, overview part 2. This is where we're going to talk about building communication pathways, conversation guidelines, factors influencing our experience, looking at behaviors, adaptive or not, and children and mental health. So that's part 2. Let me see how I'm doing with time here. Okay. So building communication pathways. I want you to think about setting the stage for a candid conversation. Now, part of what's important here is you need to know how you feel about a particular topic before you start trying to set the stage, because there may be certain areas that are either unfamiliar to you or you have, pretty strong reaction to. And I think that sometimes you need to suspend what your reaction is, because you want your grandchildren to be able to approach you. Interactions and conversations are building bridges, and that your children know that they can come to you and your grandchildren to talk about feelings without you being judgmental. I also want you to give yourself credit for facing the challenging discussions, even though you may lack the confidence or knowledge to handle a particular subject. That's okay. You're not going to know everything. And I think to say, listen, I really don't know a lot about that, but I'm going to help you with this anyway, and we'll figure it out together. I had a young lady who I saw many, many years ago who was struggling with an eating disorder, and her parents, her mother used to lay down in bed with her because she thought the 12-year-old was just going to die. And so I saw him for treatment for several years, and she wound up going to University of Pennsylvania, has a doctorate in education, and she's brilliant. But she said, you know what, there was one thing that really stood out that you helped me with. And I thought, wow, what was that? I'd like to know what that one thing was. And she said, you'll always land on your feet. You'll figure it out. Just remember that. Conversation guidelines. Okay. Be present in the conversation. What does that mean? You're not answering the phone. Cell phones are off. Television's down. You're listening attentively. You're looking at them. You're leaning forward. And you're not judgmental. Listen attentively and without judgment. You give reassurance. We're going to figure this out. Be genuine and authentic. Being mindful of the grandchild's age, maturity level, and emotional style. Grandchild's age, what you may tell a 6-year-old is going to be different than what you tell a 17-year-old. Their emotional style, what I want to talk about this is that certain kids will be more reactive than others. Some will be more sensitive than others. That's because, we can have We can have grandchildren or children grown up, you raised your children in the same manner, but they have different personalities. And that's okay. But being aware of that and how much information you give. Be open and accepting and supportive, even if you don't know the answers. That's okay. They'll respect that you don't have all the answers. Be honest and allow for silence. Don't feel like adults have a tendency to repeat themselves and over-explain. And lead with empathy. Empathy is different from sympathy. Sympathy is, oh, wow, that's really too bad. I feel so badly for you and so sorry. Now, empathy is, wow, that must be really hard where you're at. And I can only imagine that for you. But be empathic, understand, but also be able to provide that support to move forward in a solution. Let's figure it out. Factors that influence how an event is experienced. Elements of the event. Now, I highlighted this because so critical how people around them react. If a child has an experience and everyone around them is like Chicken Little, the sky is falling, it's very unsettling. So to keep calm is important. Keep a calm presence. Their exposure to the event, how relevant, how it affects them, and prior traumas or events. What's important, once again, individual differences, their ability to cope. Do people have varying abilities to cope? Yes. Certain people seem to be able to handle things better than others, but they can learn coping mechanisms. That's important. Their temperament, how reactive they are, how mature they are, their confidence, their ability to be flexible. People who are successful in life, structure is important, but also flexibility. And their self-concept, how they feel about themselves. I think this is where, when we talk to our grandchildren, saying, you know what, you're a good thinker. You've done a great job with that. I can see how you strategize. Our self-concept is developed in childhood by what other people tell us. And that's very important. So if you say those things, you're really solving that problem great. Or, wow, let's focus on the solution. Or, that's great how you did that. Now, looking at behaviors, if they're adaptive or not, a period of adjustment is expected with change for everybody. Now, adaptive behavior is if they've bounced back pretty quickly. Often you see commercials about antidepressants and everything. It says that if you feel this way longer than 2 weeks, 2 weeks is kind of a period we look at. Do I think people should be on medication 2 weeks right after or something? Not necessarily. I'm not supporting that. You have to take a look at a person's ability to function on a daily basis. A kid may be upset about something, a grandchild, and next week it's okay. All right. But the severity of their behaviors, how often and duration, if they start avoiding certain situations, I think that's what we have to look at. And some of the areas that are affected by depression, would be sleep, appetite, mood, concentration, and energy. Also, what's very interesting about kids who are depressed, sometimes they act out and they're what you would say misbehaving. And that can be when they're really struggling and can't talk about their feelings. Sometimes they don't have the words. Behaviors associated with anxiety, they think all the time. They're thinking, ruminating means they're going over and over and over things. They can't let go of it. Unrealistic behaviors with OCD. Any successful person is to be a little OCD, but if they are repetitively doing something and it interferes with their quality of life on a daily basis, or if their anxiety is out of proportion, where they can't function, they shut down and avoid, or if they have social anxiety disorder, they're overly self-conscious and avoid and don't want to go out. That's more when there's a mental health problem. So we look if it's adaptive, if they've kind of bounced back or not. Children and mental health. When we look at anxiety, and I want you to read the bottom in red, children have an amazing capacity for resilience. Just remember that. Just remember that. We talked about individual differences. Some children are more anxious than not. Usually when I have somebody who has an anxiety disorder, I ask, were they an anxious avoidant child? And they'll say, well, yes. Or sometimes they say no. The medium or midpoint of the onset, beginning of an anxiety disorder is about 7 years old. And there usually is a genetic predisposition, and early intervention is best. Going to a counselor, seeking help, I think that's very important. And I want you to understand that anything with anxiety and depression, that is not like have to be something that you feel cannot be helped, because absolutely with mental health problems, early intervention is the best, and recovery. It's all about recovery and resilience. Depression, feelings of sadness are appropriate when sad things happen. You know, if something sad happened, sometimes people say, well, you don't be so worried about that, or don't be so sad. No, because that message is that, like, you're not allowed to be sad. Say, it's really sad that that happened. Let's talk about that. Diagnosed depression can occur as early as later in the teenage years, not earlier. Mental health problems respond well to treatment. It's not always a lifelong problem. That's important. And sometimes I know I've recommended medication for people, not the first card I play, but that can really help them to bounce back, and they don't have to be on it forever. Okay, so this is really the meat of, the presentation. Part 3, how to talk about difficult topics, conversation strategies, conversation starters, using the media to your advantage, reviewing challenges and applying information, and coping strategies. Okay. How to talk about difficult topics. So, first of all, you ask your grandchild what they know about the current situation, because maybe you think they know more than they do, or it's important to meet them on their level. What do they know about this? And share their thoughts. Well, what do you think about this? What do you think, what have you seen on television lately? Or what do you talk about in school? And ask them what their feelings are. Let them share with you. Remember that silence. You want to know where they're at. Because maybe what they want to know going into the next thing is different than what you think you should tell them. Listen carefully to what they're saying and asking. Now, what I have here is reframe what your grandchild said. And you use this actually good communication skills with anybody, because sometimes what you heard and what they said are two different things. So you can say, listen, help me out here. Is what you're saying, is this what you're saying? I just want to be clear about that. And that can help them talking, plus clarify what it is they're asking. Ask what's important to them. Don't make assumptions. Let them tell you about their concerns and worries, because kids usually, they want to know how things are going to affect them personally, not maybe all these other things that you think they should want to know. Meet them at their level. Once again, I keep repeating, be aware of their individual levels, their maturity level, and their emotional style, and ask them, how can I help you with this? Let's talk about this. Sometimes what you can do is you can just act like what's like the Columbo effect with Peter Falk. It seemed like he really didn't know what was going on. He acted a little, not so smart, but he really knew what was going on. You say, hey, you know what? Sometimes I wonder about this, because I wonder about what's happening, with the world. And, I don't know, what do you think about this? Or you let them help you do something. Okay. Let them teach you about technology, because let's face it, they know a lot more about technology. Let them help you sometimes with things and say, thank you for helping. You helped me to solve that problem. That was a good solution. Be relevant. Use stories in the news to set the stage. We're going to do that in the next slide. And I used the slide, the topic, children mental health, in this slide, and how to introduce the topic to your grandchild, and sample conversations, sample questions, and be reassuring and supportive, and reinforcing the message, how to get help. A burden shared is an easier load. Now, a couple of things about this slide. I wanted to make it pertinent to Colorado and not just nationwide, but just to give you information. This is not for you to just worry, oh my gosh, I think that my youngster is depressed, they're not functioning well, they're thinking about suicide. This is the other misnomer I want to clarify. It used to be back in the day, they would say, don't ask somebody about suicide because you're putting the thought in their head. No. If they're thinking about it, it's already there. And by asking a person how they feel, you're letting them know that you're open for them to share your feelings. And this is the story. It may be difficult to ask about this, but think of this as an opportunity for someone to tell you how badly they're feeling. and they're reaching out to you. And I don't think you want to look back and say, I think I should have asked that question. All right. I'll give you a little guidance on that, how to do that. So suicide is the 8th leading cause of death in children 8 to 11 years old nationwide. Almost 80% of children who die by suicide made a suicidal statement. Suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death among teens, 15 to 19 years of nationwide. And in Colorado, if we go all the way to the right, the rate of teen suicide increased 58% in 3 years from 2016 to 2019. 1 in 5 adolescents have died from suicide, and Colorado has one of the highest suicide rates in the nation. In the middle, the second point, the middle of the slide, Children's Hospital in Colorado reported ER visits for mental health crises are up 90% in April 2021. What I highlighted was, and props and hats off to Douglas County, the Sources of Strength program that was started in Douglas County 5 years ago will be expanding to 4 other counties with the highest suicide rates. I also made some notes. Let me put my glasses on. The Attorney General of Colorado is starting prevention initiatives. They started that a couple of years ago. They have peer connectors in schools because kids are more apt to talk to their peers first about this, feeling badly or feeling depressed. And he's designated funds to study suicide, $200,000. And Sources of Strength program is going to be expanded. So that's the good news. That's very important. And that can be a conversation starter too. Gee, do you have a Sources of Strength program in your school? You know anything about that? Well, I don't know. I heard about that. I read that in the news. Let's talk about that. What do you think about that? Okay, so here's a conversation starter. I just gave you an example. You could use, well, you read that in the news. And I do have the reference. It was in the Denver Post in December 2017, those particular statistics. So you can say, you know, stories in the news talk about it's been hard on kids not being in school with their friends and they may be sad. You know, what do you think about that? Does that happen? Do you notice that in school? What do you notice about the kids? Is it different today? And you know, you kind of like see what they say and you keep the conversation going. The young lady whose mother said, listen, she doesn't talk a lot. And she really didn't have a good, I guess, connection with another therapist because the therapist never said anything to her. I'm very interactive. I think it's important. Ask them. So that's an opening statement. And you say, well, what do you think about that? Well, I don't know. Well, has it been hard on you not being in school? How has it affected you? Can you tell me how you feel? I feel sometimes, and you can, this is where you can say, don't say when I was a kid, because they think, well, you know, you're as old as Methuselah, it doesn't really translate. But you say, I know sometimes it can be tough when you don't see your friends. Or I know sometimes you can be sad about something. Okay, so it depends on what your delivery is. I always say something how you can hear it. What would be supportive to you? This is the lead in. Sometimes a person can be so sad that every day is hard for them, they're depressed, and they may not want to live. What would you say to a friend that's depressed like that? Has that happened to you? And have you ever felt that way? And this, you know, there's a conversation. This isn't like 5 minutes. We just go through the 5 questions, okay? But giving also the message, even though it's hard to talk about sad feelings, it's important to talk to somebody that's troubling you. You know, when I'm upset about things, it really helps me to talk to another person about it. They really help me sometimes to see it differently. But you can always talk to me about anything, and I will always be there to help you. Now, reviewing challenges. If we look at school violence and schools have a lockdown plan, you can say, oh boy, that must heighten anxiety. But I want you to consider these things, okay? First of all, the last point. No plan would be open-ended and create anxiety. We don't know what we're doing. How many people have said, listen, if there's ever a fire in the house, we're all going to meet we're all going to meet by the garage. Okay, that's a plan. Now, because now you know what you have to do. So reacting to the school's lockdown program, you say you're using strategic planning to be prepared. It can be a positive experience that you have a plan and you all talk about it. Getting ahead of anxiety can feel more in control of a situation, because when we have anxiety, it's because we feel loss of control. And a solution focus helps to handle the fear. So you can use that school violence as an example. Now, another example is the COVID pandemic. This is a large-scale example of using problem solving and how we all are involved in the solution process. We have scientists figuring out answers. We have research. We have hospitals. We have schools and institutions. It's an example of how the worldwide community is uniting to solve a global issue. And that's good. We all work together. And the solution has a lot of moving parts. And yes, we've changed our daily routines because we know our own feelings about how things were changing all the time. But they were changing because of new information. So that can be, you can reframe it in a very positive, solution-focused, preparedness, strategic planning manner. That's reviewing and applying the information we've talked about. When we look at cyberbullying, which is very anonymous because now bullies can just weigh in anonymously and say all these things. I think what's very important is that you tell, your grandchild, not everybody feels that way just because that person is saying that. And to limit that social media time, to help them be proactive. I mean, talk about their feelings. And I'll say, well, don't feel that way because not everybody feels that way. No, just say, that must be really hard to hear. But, not everybody feels that way. And bullies do it anonymously because they're really very much a coward to say things. And talk about anti-bullying campaigns in school and about empowerment and to be vocal against bullying. I think that's important. When we look at social unrest, war, and discrimination, once again, this is an example illustrating the importance of conflict resolution, that not everybody feels the same way about a topic. We know that even about masks, to wear a mask or not wear a mask. And which seems like pretty simplistic it should be, but people have varying different feelings about it. But that people, I guess, are entitled to their feelings, but about conflict resolution is important. How do we solve a conflict? What do? We want to know from the other person's perspective and where you can meet in the middle. It's another example, this war and discrimination, about a worldwide community coming together and thinking critically, that countries are uniting to try peaceful ways to resolve issues, and also formulating plans and think about strategically on how to resolve an issue. So these can be, you can take all of these examples and talk about the importance, once again, critical thinking, conflict resolution, solution focus, problem solving, because they'll need that all their lives. Coping skills, I think it's important practicing mindfulness, which kids are being taught in school about mindfulness, which is intentional focus. We focus on just certain things and calming, breathing. You can Google coping skills and see what might fit for you. There are meditation apps. There's an app called Insight Timer, which is free. Calm is not free, I know that. But Insight Timer is free, and they have like thousands of different meditations. Some are guided, some are unguided, and some are short, some are long. There are apps for kids as well. Now you can, with your grandchild, let's take a look at this. You have an app, for relaxation, and do it with them. Also, when a child is experiencing maybe anxiety, and when we do too, distraction is important. We can distract ourselves because, as you know, if you have anxiety about something and all of a sudden you hear a crash outside and you're saying, uh-oh, what happened there? Your anxiety now is translated. It's distracted by the problem that's out there, okay? Like we were talking before, with all this rain and trees falling, and is our electricity going to go out? Also, when you play games with your kids, they sometimes will talk about things when they're playing games, or if you take a walk. I think that's important. Humor, who doesn't like a good story or a good joke? Or when your kids are in that age and they tell you a joke, that's, why the chicken crossed the road, that type of thing. How many times are you going to hear that? But humor and laugh, that's so important. And self-care. You need to also take care of yourselves as you are co-pilots for your children. You need to relax, spend time, you exercise, spend time with other people. The other thing I want to say is talking to other grandparents about their experience, what their kids are experiencing and how they handle it is very important to help you with your perspectives. So here I have some resources on cyberbullying, bullying, and mindfulness apps that you can consider. And other resources on building resilience and self-esteem activities. There's so much on the internet that is available nowadays. So I hope that, you know, this information has been helpful to you. Now, when I talk about the Source of the Strength program, I wanted to give you information where you can get more, know more about the Source of Strength program. It's strength-based prevention to build those protective factors, and also a suicide prevention hotline. I think that's important for everyone to have in case that, you know, I wanted to mention too that there is a young man, he's probably 40 now. I had come to the university. His name is Kevin Hines, Hines, and he jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge and he lived, and which I do think he feels is divine intervention. I brought him to the hospital. I brought him to the university, and spent considerable time with him. And he now speaks nationwide about suicide. And he said, and this is so important, and he's talked to other people, said the same things, people who have survived. Most people have not survived that particular jump, that suicide attempt. He said the moment he jumped, he didn't want to. He wanted to live. So remember that. Asking somebody if they're feeling that way, did you want to hurt yourself? Did you want to take your own life? They want you to reach out. And he said that many a time. So just keep that in mind. And you know what? Because that question will never be an easy question. The day it becomes an easy question, wow, it's not an easy question to ask, but it's an opportunity for you to make a difference. Just remember that. So I want to thank you for being at this presentation, and I hope that you were able to get some information from it. If you have any questions, please, you know, I think that Luke can, you can ask some questions from him, and my email address is up there and my office number. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Van Meter. If you have a question about the presentation, please drop it into the chat now or raise your hand and I will be able to call on you or read your question out loud. And I think everybody is now well equipped to co-pilot with their grandchildren. I don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Well,
Van
thank
Meter.
you once again. You're welcome. Thank you for
very
the
much. This is
opportunity. I do
really
appreciate it.
Great information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, and while people are still thinking about that, was so much information, Dr. Meter.
know.
It's really giving us the tools to encourage and support our kids and teens when they seek out having those difficult conversations. And I know we feel better prepared to help them work through those uncomfortable feelings and offer them a sense of security. And I especially appreciate the actual words to use to start and continue those difficult conversations. I know for many of us, it's where do we begin? So you gave us a great resource there and how to begin. I will share a little story. I have 3 grandchildren, and I was spending some one-on-one time with the middle child who just turned 14 about the humor and just doing some fun activities. Just out of the blue, I said to her, I said, Hannah, if you had children and you had to name them after flowers, what would you pick? I said, pretend you have 5 kids and they're all girls. What would you name them? And the names have to be flowers. We had more fun with that than you can imagine. And of course, you talk about technology. She immediately got on her phone and she Googled, children's names based on flowers. And there are some flowers I learned about from her research that I didn't even know existed. So it was a wonderful time. We did a lot of laughing about it. I said to her, can you imagine naming a little girl Gladiola? Well, she didn't even know what a gladiola was. So I could teach her that, and she came up with some really good ideas. So I just throw that out there for, when you're connecting with your grandchildren, it can be a very fun and bonding kind of experience, and so important. And just a reminder that our presentations are recorded. So if you'd like to hear Dr. Van Meter's presentation again, or would like to recommend her presentation to someone you know, wherever they reside, that's the wonderful part of our technology. You have a family member, in Kansas or Canada or whatever. Just have them visit our YouTube channel, and you can hear Dr. Van Meter's expertise. Now, as Tiffany mentioned, next month meeting is going to be May 5th at 10 a.m. It's a virtual meeting, and we'll have Cindy Kaufman talking to us. So that would be a very helpful one to tune into. And if you're interested in receiving our electronic newsletter, First Friday, it's called First Friday Update, let us know by contacting us at our email address that you see on the screen, and we'll be happy to send it directly to your email each month, the first Friday of the month. It contains not only a preview of the upcoming presentation for the month following, but also some interesting information we think you'll enjoy. You'll find more information about the Seniors Council itself and our upcoming meetings and the events that we have planned on our Facebook page, which you see on the screen, and on Douglas County's website. We do have a web page through the Douglas County government. You can catch us on that as well. Luke, do you see anybody that has thought of anything to ask Dr. Van Meter before we let her go? Luke, you there?
Yes, sorry. I do have one comment here.
Okay.
Janet, it says, I find it surprising that children as young as 8 years old are committing suicide. And then just another comment. Thank you, Dr. Van Meter, for the excellent presentation. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on the reverse relationship of how grandchildren can support their grandparents, specifically during the COVID pandemic.
Well, couple of things I wanted to mention. One point that I had forgotten to mention about the grandchildren that I'm going to do, but I think when we talk about co-pilots, we're talking about we help each other out. Like when I was talking about technology, let the children or grandchildren help you out because you don't know certain things. Having a conversation when your children or grandchildren, when your grandchildren are going to school, they were adapting to their environment, maybe better than some adults were, because we were more fearful than they. Because there was, once again, a plan in place. You had to stay 6 feet apart, or they had these. They had, I know, and some of the kids that I saw in school, they said that there were these plastic dividers, and they were plastic dividers. So they were already involved in people who were having a solution focus, where we might not have been. I think that what happened to us, particularly if you were in, we were in an age group, I was too, where I wasn't going into my office to see people. I was doing phone sessions, because, I'm over 70. My husband's over 70, has some health issues. And I think re-entry back into the office and re-entry into life, also was difficult. So I think talking about those things and, with your grandchildren, they can help you with a different perspective as well. So it's mutual. I think that's a great point and just illustrates, working together, because you can learn things from them. And they may say, well, they're not worried about it because, they're going to school and they're washing their hands and they're whatever. I think, communication and sharing is so important. Another thing I wanted to mention that I forgot, you've seen in the news, there was a couple of years ago, a stellar student from University of Pennsylvania who was brilliant, had a brilliant career ahead of them, just graduating #1 in their class. And somebody from Stanford, somebody from University of Pennsylvania, that for all outward appearances looked like their life was great, and they took their own life. What I think is important sometimes is those kind of kids who feel such the pressure to be perfect that when they do have problems, they're unable to reach out because they feel so that they have to be the epitome of success. And I just wanted to mention that because Sometimes the expectation is because somebody is so smart that they're not going to have any problems, or they feel that they shouldn't share problems. Everybody does. We all have issues. A burden shared is an easier load.
Hey, thank you. Those are all the questions.
Okay,
Okay.
great. All right. Well, thanks so much for spending your morning with us, and we look forward to having you join us again at next month's meeting. Be sure to enjoy some fresh air and try not to have that wind take you all the way to Kansas. It's getting pretty strong out there. And as always, stay healthy and stay connected. Bye for now.